All right, so Floyd Mayweather Jr., Money Mayweather, one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time, one of the greats of all time. Just want to put that out there. I think he's a terrific talent, right? Terrific fighter, Hall of Famer without question, right? But I obviously have my criticisms of Floyd, right? No fighter is above criticism. Now, this is not, I'm not going to talk about his resume here. I'm not going to talk about any of that. This is just an honest observation, right? Now, before somebody says, why are you talking about him then? Well, because he came out on first take. He came out on first take and look, first of all, let me just make this clear. I think a lot of fighters are a terrible interview, all right? But Mayweather in particular, I mean, it's a terrible interview. It just is. The guy's constantly talking about all the money he's made and all the quote unquote records he's broken. He just keeps talking about that. Whenever somebody brings up a potential fight of his, he talks about the money he's made and the money his opponents made. He'll bring up stuff that are, I guess, in his mind, a way to, diminish his rival and prop himself up. But at times where it makes no sense, right? Like, for example, Floyd. You know how Stephen A. Smith talks, right? I mean, that dude's over the top, right? If I hear anybody tell me they hate pro wrestling, but they listen to First Take and are fans of the show, all right, you're watching a fucking uh, this dude is a walking, talking promo. But anyway, over the top, Stephen A. Right? So tell me, Floyd, what are you gonna do to Conor in the ring? Tell us what are you gonna do in the ring, Floyd? Right? Tell us what Money Mayweather's gonna do. Well, you see, Conor, he has a boss. I don't have a boss. I don't answer to a boss. What? Like nobody's even talking about that. They ask how you're gonna whoop his ass in the ring. Like, I just don't get it, man. Look, and don't tell me you don't notice it. Come on, right? And it's like there's certain trigger words. Anytime like money or something associated with popularity or authority of some form, it always reroutes him on whatever point he's making, whatever they ask him. If it's money, boom, he'll start talking about all the I made. I'm a 9-figure fighter. Like it's just when it just doesn't go, when nobody's asking you about that, right? And I've always felt, and it's just my honest opinion, the dude just goes out of his way. And when I say go out of his way, literally in questions that have nothing to do with that, answers that have nothing to do with the question asked, right? Because it's what he wants to talk about. He wants to talk about making a lot of money. He wants to talk about the records he's broken on pay-per-view. And look, and that's great, but you can't talk about that over and over again in a 20-minute interview. After the first, anyone's done talking about that. All right. I mean, I was shocked that he brought up the whole Pretty Boy Floyd, but even then, like he lost his train of thought and he started talking about money again. Right? He was trying to make the point that, he was boxing as an amateur as a teenager. He turned pro as a teenager, and then and the point he was trying to make is where Lomachenko is now, and who was the other fighter? It was Lomachenko. Max Harman said Lomachenko, and he said, I think, Crawford, right? And I think his point was, he was just something else, right? When he was Pretty Boy Floyd, he was at a whole nother level, better than those guys, okay? Now, do I agree with him in that department? Yes, I do, right? But it was like a very brief moment that he really talked about that, it's just saying, right? It's very rare that I watch a Floyd interview, all right, and he doesn't start talking. I mean, every answer he gives It's about how he's his own boss or how much money he's made, how many pay-per-views he sold, and questions that have nothing to do with that. Nothing, right? And to me, again, my honest opinion, there's some insecurities there, right? If you need to keep telling people over and over and over and over again, by the way, I've gotten the highest purse of all time. By the way, I know you're asking me about something else, but just by the way, I mean, I'm my own boss, right? I know. I'm going to get to that question, but just before I do, okay, over 100 million. Okay, I made that. He hasn't made that. He hasn't made more than 3 million, right? Oh, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get there. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody I hold a pay-per-view record. At some point, right? Even when he talks about, I want to find the next Floyd Mayweather, I'm like, oh, great. All right, cool. Right? You're going to scout? What are you going to do? Who's the next Floyd? Right? And he starts talking about, I did everything right. I don't know if anybody was ever going to get to my level, because I took care of myself and I didn't take any punishment. And then all of a sudden he starts talking about all his records again. He starts telling us again about everything he sold and how many records he's broken and how he's had the highest person in history. How's the A side? I mean, an A side shouldn't constantly have to tell you his A side. Everybody just knows you are, right? You don't have to keep telling people how rich you are. People just know you are, right? You don't have to tell people over and over and over again that you broke the pay-per-view record. Now, fights break records, not fighters, as far as pay-per-views, but point taken. Okay, I get the point, right? So we have to kind of, do I give him a pass? I guess, sure. But once you see one Floyd Mayweather interview, they're all the same, right? They're all the same. I mean, Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman played it off like it's all cool, but at times they were trying to put words in Floyd's mouth. Like, Floyd, this is a better answer. No, my money aside, Floyd. We all know you're rich, but I mean, finances aside, but and it's the interviews just come up. They suck. Right? I'm sorry. I don't come off like, man, this dude's just fucking amazes me with his knowledge. Like, I just don't come off that way. All right. Almost every interview, he does talk about, yeah, sure. He talks about guys that paved the way for him and stuff like that, and he has to talk about how those guys could barely walk and, not me, like, look at me. And I'm doing better than them because I took care of myself. And like, I get it. And sure, I understand you're a great defensive fighter, but in that same interview, you are talking about, working smarter, not harder. And it kind of hurts you a little bit, whenever we're comparing your resume, with the all-time greats, because this is coming out of your own mouth. You yourself are saying that you look for the easiest fights for the most money. And the reality is, especially for a fighter that's made hundreds of millions in the sport, okay, the reality is, it doesn't bother me per se, but it doesn't make it an interesting interview. I want to hear Floyd talk about some of his fights. I want to hear him break down some of the technical aspects of the fight and other fights that is, other than just saying, yeah, it was easy work. I made easy work of him. Well, we get it, but, can you kind of talk about the fight? Does Floyd have any interesting stories? Is there anything interesting? I'm sure there is. I want to talk about this thing. He just wants to talk about how much money he's made, right? About how he keeps breaking records, okay? And right now, he's talking about wanting to make the Conor McGregor fight because it makes the most sense. And talking about how, hey, I work smarter, not harder. All right. Those are your words. I'm not putting words in his mouth. That's exactly what he said. Yeah, but just overall, man, it's never an interesting interview. There's athletes out there that when I find out, oh shit, like they're interviewing this guy, right? and you listen, man, and they're interesting, and they have interesting stories. And Floyd, he just wants to talk about the money he's made. He just constantly wants to keep reminding people, like we don't know he's rich. Oh, by the way, look how rich I am. You know, um, and boxing just doesn't interest him. He just doesn't want to talk about the sport. I mean, he'll tell you who he thinks is going to win a basketball game or a football game or the Super Bowl. But he won't really talk about fights. Once in a while, he'll throw a bone. Oh, I think Chocolatito's #1 pound for pound, or he won't talk about the fights. He won't break down the fights. He won't tell you who he's beat. He won't tell you who else is in the running and who they face and who they beat and stuff like that. But is it because he doesn't know, or he just doesn't care? I don't know. It's just, in my honest opinion, right? The dude's a born interview, right? It's, and that's all I got to say. That's honestly all I got to say. I didn't learn anything about Floyd. Like you would think the whole point of an interview is to come on here and, part of it is the interviewers. I get that. But it's very rare that you learn something new about Floyd in an interview. It's rare. He'll like throw stuff out there. Like, who do you think is the #1 pound for pound? Yeah, well, I think Chocolatito #1 pound for pound. But you know what? He has a boss. Like, dude, like nobody gives a fuck if he has a boss, dude. All right? What? Like, we get it. I think we get it. Does everybody get it? He doesn't have a boss. Like, do we all get it? We get it, right? I understand. You don't have a boss. You have a lot of money. You made a lot of money. You were in record-breaking pay-per-view fights. We get it. We know. All right, good for you. That's good. Can we talk about something else for the next 15 minutes? All right? That's all I'm asking. I mean, when an interviewer, there was a point where Max Kellerman asked him a question. Floyd started talking about, his money and pay-per-views, and then Max Kellerman reworded the question. He even said, no, well, with that aside, Floyd, or something like that, or with your finances aside, we understand it's this financial incentive. But isn't it an easy fight? Isn't it like a mismatch, Floyd? And Floyd didn't answer that question. He didn't want to talk about the fight being a mismatch. He wanted to talk about how much money the fight makes, right? And then talk about how he's his own boss and Connor's not his own boss, right? I mean, I don't know, okay? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right? And in this Golovkin a bad interview, sure, but that's because the dude doesn't speak really good English. Okay, that's about it. Okay, yes. This is boxing. His answer about everything is this is boxing. All right, this is boxing. Like, hey, what do you think about this? It's boxing. Like what? Is that your answer about everything? Like it's boxing? All right, look, we know it's boxing. Yeah, okay. But anyway. Hey, this is boxing. Keep it boxing. I'm out.